As a friend, I introduce to you Mr. Eric Hafter.
Kind of like the old auditorium, you just walk up. Kind of walk out, you get dark, and you come back to the light. As Mr. Adler indicated, we used to teach in the old auditorium. We just walked up to the stage, it was no big deal. Now we got to go into some dark hole and come back out in the light. It's definitely different. Welcome to the Moores, to our family. And hello, and Chiefs. It's a pleasure to be here today under these very difficult circumstances, but I'm very humbled to be able to address you today. I'm going to be up here for two people, frankly, myself, and I received notice from Jeff Paris. Jeff Paris was the athletic director during the wonderful golden years that Kieta just spoke about. And he wanted me to read some remarks, and I told him I would. He is ill and he couldn't make it today. So I indicated to him I would certainly read his remarks. And they go as follows. Paul Moore was an integral part of the golden age of athletics at Miami Carroll City, beginning in the mid-'80s. I first met Paul when he joined the social studies department, of which I was a member. Passionate about his teaching, he did an exceptional job in the classroom, and his students loved and respected him. A big man at 6 foot 6 inches, his presence commanded respect. I taught across the hall from him for several years, and we would often discuss athletics at Carroll City, in which he was very interested and attended many events. One year in the early 80s, we were in need of a head coach for girls basketball. In those days, a head coach had to be a full-time teacher at the school, and no one else had applied. I told the then athletic director, Jack Brady, that I thought Paul might be a good candidate. Jack told me to ask him, which I did, and Paul turned me down. Several of the girls on the team were in my class at the time, and I told them to go and ask Mr. Moore themselves, which they did, and again he said no. The girls were downtrodden, but I told them to get some more of their teammates and go see him after school as a group. Be cute and energetic, and tell him how much they wanted him to be their coach. It worked. The third time was the charm, and Paul Moore walked over to me and said, "Okay, I'll do it." The following day, I spoke with Paul about what he needed to do to get the program started, and that's when he told me he knew nothing about basketball. He played baseball in high school. I asked him if he really liked basketball, and he said yes, and I told him to become a student of the game, read, study, and there were a lot of coaches on the staff who would give him advice. Jerry Latito was here at the time, Walt Frazier, who's in the audience today. It's good to see Walt. In particular, could give him advice about how to run practice, drills, and how to manage a team. A few years later, Ernie Dell became the head men's basketball coach, and Paul became glued to his side. Paul attended clinics, faithfully attended the men's basketball games, and learned the game. Paul was not an overnight success, but he learned, and he learned quickly. He worked hard and worked his girls harder. His teams played with great enthusiasm, discipline, and desire. He had the girls work at fundraisers and took them to basketball camps around the state. He himself attended clinics paying his own way. With quality and dedicated assistance, his teams became the outstanding program in Dade County, culminating with a state championship and a state runner-up. He won over 300 games as the head coach at Miami Carroll City. Paul gave 100% of himself to the girls' basketball team, the players becoming his second family. They often babysat for the Moores that could be found hanging out at their home on weekends. He checked their homework, insisted on good behavior on the floor and in the classroom. Perfect attendance and devotion to the game. Many of his players went on to college and are successful in their own right today. After a long and successful career, Coach Moore stepped down as his health deteriorated. It was a difficult decision, but one he knew he had to make. It was best for the girls. It's sad that in today's world we have forgotten the impact athletics has had on so many students here at Carroll City. the 14 state championships the school won from 1969 to 2003. Add to that the 4 state runner-up championships and many, many other state runner-ups in every sport for 2 years over a 34-year period. No other school in Dade County can make that claim. We've been blessed to have had many outstanding head coaches: Walt Frazier, Ernie Bell, Jerry Latito, Robin Pete Hertler, Troy Parker, Jack Brady, Joe Pies, Vernon Wilder, Ed Newkirk, Roberta Dent, and Paul Moore, just to name a few of the many who walked those halls and coached our children. A former principal made the statement at a faculty meeting that the coaches were his best teachers. In order to coach, you must be able to teach. And then Mr. Parrish goes on and says he regrets he wasn't able to be here today. And he misses Coach Moore every day. God bless him and let his memories remain a part of our lives forever. Thank you, Mr. Parrish. As for myself, I first met Paul Moore in 1988 when I was hired to teach at Carroll City in the Social Studies department. In our department meetings, Paul was always the irreverent skeptic, the professional who doubted the wisdom of virtually every policy adopted by our superiors. He never kept a strong opinion to himself. He earned my respect immediately. Later that year, I went on a mission for lesson plans. I needed a template, a format that wouldn't be too long, too, shall we say, taxing. I approached many of the teachers I grew respect, among them Miss Kaplan, who's here today as well. Her plans were far more elaborate and time-consuming than my lazy self was willing to put forth. I also went to Fred Goldman. Fred Goldman had a very nice template, but I couldn't make sense of what he wrote. Finally, I approached Mr. Moore. There he was at his desk, working on something, and he had his baseball cap on. And I walked up to him. I didn't know him that well at the time. I said, "Do you have a lesson plan that I could look at? I'd like to maybe use. I'm a new teacher." And he just ignored me at first. And then I remember I had to ask again, pause, and I said, "Did you forget it? Is there a problem with me looking at your lesson plans?" He just turned, took off his hat, and did one of these, and smiled. That very, very sinister smile of his, and went back to work. And I just laughed. I had to laugh. And I thought, those are exactly the plans I was looking for. From then on, we were friends. In 2005, Paul, myself, as Mr. Adler indicated, we were teaching up here in the auditorium. One day, Paul brought a video. I'm sure those of you who had him as a teacher know he could bring videos. He brought in a Dave Chappelle video. He said it was to provide an inner city urban perspective on reality. Okay, I'm with that. Okay. Well, in the old building, the back door was left open. That was an honest mistake. So passers-by could hear what was going on inside the auditorium, and we played it pretty loud. And if you know Dave Chappelle's work, he's known to throw an F-bomb out there on occasion. Well, there were a few F-bombs said, and here walks Mr. Stiles into the auditorium. Now, the auditorium by that time had developed into this huge laughter. I mean, everybody's laughing. We're laughing. Everybody's laughing. Dave Chappelle's funny. So Stiles walks up, and Mr. Adler, myself, and Mr. Moore behind the screen. You got to get this image if you can. Mr. Stiles, he's a large man. If you don't know Mr. Stiles, he's a large man. So Mr. Stiles walks up, and he comes up to me. He says, "This is inappropriate. You shouldn't be showing Chappelle everything that's going on." And he goes off for like 5 minutes on me, with me. And I'm doing this. Now, I was frankly a little intimidated. I I was kind of scared, you know. I mean, we're talking about, I think I told you, Mr. Spiles is a large man. So I didn't know what to say. I was like stunned. He's there going off on me. I didn't know what to say. I said, well, I was trying to see Peter and Paul behind me, looking around this large man. And I said, he brought it. And Paul's there. And so Stiles is going, you're department chair, you're responsible. And in the meantime, the place is full. You know, everybody's laughing. Paul and Peter are cracking up. They're enjoying my misery rather than Chappelle at this point. And here I am trying to come up with an answer. And the only thing I could tell him by the time I realized my health was not an issue anymore and he wasn't going to do any bodily damage, I just said, well, if you think this is bad, wait till you see what we got for next week. Well, these are good times. These are great times, actually. Paul would not want me to waste this opportunity to comment on current issues facing our children in our community, our school. Paul would want us to do that. You've heard Mr. Adler and Mr. Ingram and others come up here and talk about current issues of the day. I can assure you in this setting, which many of you might think politics and current events wouldn't be appropriate in this setting. Well, Paul would want it that way. That's exactly what he wants. He felt the need to get the word out. The growing income disparity that has led to 47 million Americans in poverty is an outrage in the wealthiest nations on earth. Access to quality health care remains a concern for millions of Americans. Our reliance on fossil fuels will continue to feed the climate change that threatens life on our planet. I know that Paul believed that we should all view the current capitalist structure with a critical mind and a kinder, gentler heart. For Carroll City and schools across the country, especially urban schools, Paul expressed strong opposition to current educational policies guided by the national law known as No Child Left Behind. As UTD steward for many years, Paul led the fight against standardized testing and evaluations of teachers and students based on those tests, against any limitations on academic freedom, against all cuts in school budgets, especially those affecting step increases, benefits, and programs designed to provide diversity in the curriculum for our students. Many of us would agree with Paul that the goal of the educational reformers, those defenders of No Child, is to divide teachers with merit-based systems such as the Race to the Top program, is to outlaw unions, to turn public schools over to private entities. For those of us who value Paul's leadership, Paul's commitment to Carroll City and its students, Paul's friendship, we must recommit to his vision of the educational system accessible to all without regard to race, socioeconomic background, or educational level. I covered many of the issues dear to Paul and dedicated to teachers everywhere the essay I submitted in the teacher gear packet last week. After reading what amounts to a serious critique of what we are experiencing, many of the ideas I got in my paper from Paul himself, which I kept like 66 of his emails and had to go through with pleasure. Many have asked me if I really intended to win. Usually I just laugh it off, you know, it's just a big comedy. But now, after considering the issues that Paul raised, given this place and given this time, my response now will be that I've already won. Since 1983, Paul has been the person everyone looked up to for leadership or advice or a hug. He was always there when needed him, no matter what the issue, no matter what the problem. He strongly believed in living the life prescribed by the great teachers of his youth, Dr. Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy, that all children, black and white alike, would grow up in schools open to all, to be judged on their character and not their skin color. That those who live with us are our brothers who share with us the same short moment of life. Like Kennedy, Paul trusted that each of us, with courage and conviction, could make a difference. that each time a man stands up for an ideal, or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope, and crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. In Paul's mind, education was a means to an end, namely tearing down those walls of oppression and resistance. He embodied the qualities that make teaching vital to future generations, qualities that go well beyond content knowledge, a genuine caring of his students as if they were his own, and integrity toward his profession and inspired his colleagues. I will remain forever grateful to be able to say that I was a colleague of Paul Moore, forever comforted knowing he was a dear friend. One of the easiest tasks I've ever had to do is to find the words to honor Paul Moore on this day. Having to do it was one of the most hardest things I've ever had to do. I'm reminded at this moment of a poem I memorized when I was a student here at Carroll City back in the 1970s. It's a poem that was written by a man named Graham Edge. He's the drummer of a band called the Moody Blues from Great Britain. He wrote it in 1969. It's titled A Dream. And it goes like this. When the white eagle of the north comes flying overhead, and the browns, reds, and golds of autumn lie in the gutter, dead, remember then that summer birds with wings of fire flame come to witness spring's new hope, born of leaves decaying. As new life will come from death, love will come at leisure. Love of love, love of life, and giving without measure, brings in return the wondrous yearn of a promise almost seen. Live hand in hand, and together we'll stand on the threshold of a dream. Rest in peace, my friend. Rest in peace, Paul Moore.